Andy, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining me.
No worries. Pleasure to be here.
And from following you online, I know that you've got a mission statement behind everything that you've done with Maven Money and the Maven Adviser. And you've very much built a podcast and a career on the statement that is ensuring you behave your way to wealth and don't misbehave your way to poverty. But I want to go back before that and understand a little bit more around how you get up to that point where you decide that that's something that you want to do with your career and obviously your online platform as well.
Yeah, sure. I'm a financial services lifer. I've been in this business since pretty much straight after university, so sort of 21, and now I'm sort of 41. So I've been in this business 20 years. Um, and I'm a financial advisor, so I advise clients about their sort of money, financial planning, investments, pensions, all that. And I also sort of do some sort of training consultancy with other financial advisors. I suppose initially I was a bit of a student of, I suppose, behavioral economics, sort of, understanding the human, condition, human misbehavior. And then that sort of led me to sort of behavioral finance. So I was experienced quite a few people in that sort of arena. And money's full of mistakes. It's a very emotional subject. Acts of admission, people not doing things. A lot of stuff's quite overcomplicated in the personal finance space. So again, it's sort of a bit smoke and mirrors from a lot of the providers, and people just don't really know what they're doing. And yeah, I've just become sort of known, I suppose, as someone who's quite heavily involved in behavioral finance. I run a behavioral finance conference for financial advisors. But it's all about the humans, basically. We don't look after pots of money as financial advisors. We look after the owners of the money, and we don't get a frantic email from a pension or a frantic phone call from an ISA. We get a phone call or a frantic email from the owner of the pension and the ISA. So they're the ones that are going to make all of the mistakes. And clients left to their own devices or people normally do the three wrongs. They do the sort of wrong thing at the wrong time for the wrong reasons. And basically, I exist to help them with basically the three wrongs.
Yeah, and what started you creating and sharing that online? Because I think if I think about personal finance when I was like coming through school, I was completely oblivious to it. I don't think we had YouTube and podcasts in the way that we do now. But what encouraged you to kind of put your head above the parapet and start to share what you're talking about now online?
Yeah, well, I was originally sharing content with other financial advisors, like telling them how to do things, how to frame things, how to talk about things with clients. Maven Money is pitched at the end consumer, but still quite a few professionals listen to it. I was inspired by other podcasts that are out at the time. Meaningful Money from Pete Matthews is one of the biggest in the UK, but I just didn't think there was one that was, I suppose, talking to slightly wealthier clients. And I'm sort of known as the no BS sort of financial advisor, and the podcast is sort of the no BS personal finance show. And I try and do it slightly unique, come up with sort of interesting ideas and concepts, and repackage financial ideas because we sell the invisible. So there isn't any physical product. So bringing that to life is somewhat of a challenge. And that's it, really. I think I tell it straight, no sugarcoating. And if people like that no BS approach, then they'll like the way I talk about money and finance. Whereas it's also quite, repellent to some people that are not sort of up for being spoken to like that. So it's doing marketing in I suppose the right way. It attracts the people that sort of can deal with that, and it pushes the people away that just get a bit sort of offended by that talk. So yeah, I don't want to have sort of 80% of listeners that are sort of think it's average. I prefer 80% to think, yeah, this is exactly what I want to be exposed to, rather than sort of have sort of weak fans, as it were.
Can completely relate to that. And you'd much rather 1,000 true fans than, as you say, people who are kind of a little bit lukewarm and they would maybe the next hot thing comes along and they drop you like a hot coal rather than you're
Yeah,
like, right, no, I
exactly.
really like what Andy has to say and I'm going to stick around for all the
Yeah.
different topics. And it probably allows you greater scope to go into different topics because you recently released an episode about ChatGPT, and that gives you
Yes.
such scope because people like the style that you take and the way you deliver things, you're able to touch on different topics, albeit, of course, that had a finance element to that episode. It wasn't
Sort of. Yeah.
necessarily, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, there's usually a tenuous link to sort of money and finance, and sometimes I do put shows out, and I think if someone just listens to this for the first time, they won't think that this is, a money show. But I'm at 280 episodes. It's a weekly show. The great thing about a weekly show is it's a weekly show. The worst thing on planet Earth about a weekly show is it's a weekly show. It's relentless. So you have to come up with different ideas all the time. So I'm constantly on the alert when I'm talking to people, to friends, to colleagues. Like usually it's issues that rock up and we think actually that's a good way of thinking about that, and then you try and put a whole sort of show together with it. But I am struggling, to be totally honest, in terms of trying to keep up the content weekly. But yeah, I'm somewhat getting there.
I think you've got a great ability to react to news, though, particularly in the personal finance space. So when interest rates change, when the latest CPI report gets released, all that kind of stuff, that's pretty easy. But like you say, it's maybe not on a weekly basis for you to dive into.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, we're getting there.
You very much positioned yourself as the unconventional personal finance show, and I know you were saying there it's because you tell it so straight. What else do you think you do differently that makes you stand out from maybe other financial creators online?
Um, I suppose it's repackaging ideas, which is the challenge. So when people sort of, I don't know, talk about the stock market, it just sounds so, sort of, I don't know, prehistoric. It doesn't really bring it to life. So I always want to, I don't want anyone to get something from my show that they can Google, if you know what I mean. So it's just a slightly more sharing wisdom. As you say, we're now awash with information. Information is not the issue. It's deciphering that information and speaking to the, and learning from the people that are hopefully sharing wisdom rather than just information. So yeah, if you're a young person these days, you can find out anything. There's just absolute overload of every different subject that you want to find out, which is good and bad. And now obviously the challenge is to sort of implement some of that stuff. Yeah, there is a whole big question about personal finance and should it be taught in school, but I just don't think people are ready for it. Talking about interest rates and inflation and mortgages to 9-year-olds, 8-year-olds, 14-year-olds, it's like I'll cross that bridge when I get there. When they're motivated to find out about it. But I do appreciate some people that are trying to teach young children some of these basic concepts. But I just don't know how effective they're going to be with it. I mean, where do you draw the line? They should learn basic plumbing skills of, how to repressurize the boiler. And then it's like, loose stuff around tax. I don't know. I mean, it's quite messy and confusing being a youngster, let alone being thrown all these sort of new things that they need to learn because they may need them in the future at some point. So yeah, that's a bit off topic.
Not too far off topic though, Andy, because I certainly think with so many creators in short form, with things like TikTok, YouTube Shorts, whatever platform we're talking about, even Instagram has got a lot of reels now. There are
Yep.
maybe like short aphorisms that are getting pushed out there that may be helpful for some people to like, oh, it maybe awakens them financially to some extent to maybe want to explore it more. And like, I have to play the game by releasing a short clip or two from this podcast so they come across and listen to 60 minutes of a wider,
Yep.
more nuanced discussion. But the challenge is
Yep.
if somebody is only consuming those short form things, they maybe don't develop a deeper understanding of topics that are as serious as we're going to talk about when it comes to finance.
Yeah, I mean it's the attention spans, isn't it? So yeah, TikTok and stuff are great for consuming very, very short videos. But yeah, you're right. You're not really going to get under the skin of a subject and put some good behaviors in place to sort of move forward with your personal finance. Yeah.
I certainly noticed that you do storytelling very well. So you take maybe another concept and you tell a story around it, and then you bring a concept to the fore. What's your own strategy for learning? Is that how you, as Andy, have learned over the years about finance, or have you very much had to go into like doing the heavy textbook reading, and that's how you've benefited from this kind of wealth of knowledge that we now benefit from?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's just weird how you find yourself in life just doing things that you seem to be quite good at. So yeah, I've learned the exams, heavy textbooks, but then I've also tried to get to the essence of a subject, I suppose, because there's just usually just too much BS about certain subjects. So yeah, I mean I've read most of the classic books, Think and Grow Rich, Rich Dad Poor Dad, Influence, and then I've consumed a lot more marketing books, business books, general personal finance stuff. And then at the same time done all the exams. I suppose my skill is I'm a practicing financial advisor. So I'm not just a money influencer online. I deal with real people with real problems every single day. Generally slightly wealthier clients because that's the sort of space financial advisors work in. We work with people that have got expensive money questions. Am I saving enough for retirement? Am I going to be okay if I drop dead tomorrow? Is my family going to be safe? All these sort of questions that become an issue once you get a little bit more wealth and a little bit older. Whereas we don't work with 20-year-olds that have got £20 a month to invest. Obviously, it's important that they start their investing journey, but that's not the space that we work in. So I suppose what I was trying to do with Maven Money was reach people that I wouldn't reach in my normal day-to-day job. And people in their 20s early that are motivated to learn about money. I think if people listen to the bulk of my show in their 20s and they're motivated and they learn about money, then they're going to be in a great place going forward. Everyone's born a financial illiterate and investing illiterate, and we all have to go on a journey to become a financial literate and an investing literate. It just depends on how long that journey is. Obviously, I'm a professional, I'm an insider, so I've gone on that journey a lot quicker than your typical average person. But money is the fabric of society. I bang on about the three healths: mental health, physical health, and financial health. It is, those three are really, really important, and I know you do a lot of work around those three. And obviously, you're not an insider in the money business, but I'm sure you're trying to get your head around personal finance. Hence, listen to my show and stuff. So, yeah, I don't know if that's answered the question.
No, I certainly think it has answered the question, Andy. And I love that you speak about those three different healths, because there are people that definitely optimize for like one or two over the other, and they end up in a position where they're absolutely terrible. So perhaps you see more of it in your space, where somebody has just optimized purely for financial health, and they're in like they've earned a shit ton of money, and they've maybe invested it fairly well, but then they've massively sacrificed like their physical health or their mental well-being, and they've got like terrible relationships with their body, their mind, and the people around them. But then also I definitely see people who maybe are just purely optimizing for like experience and fun and fulfilling that mental side of themselves, and financially they haven't got a pot to piss in. And I think most of the UK, if you look at some of the stats, there's so many people who just don't even have like any form of investment or saving beyond like month to month, and that terrifies me, that people in my demographic that are listening to a show like mine wouldn't have considered those other elements of their life to move forward. And that's why I love having financial guests like yourself, like Pete Matthew, like Andrew Craig, these people that speak very directly and clearly to a younger audience and can guide them in the right path.
Yeah, I believe you need to get investing as soon as possible, whatever amount it is. Even if you're in debt, I recommend getting investing, because otherwise it may never happen. The traditional advice is, if you've got any debt, student debt, etc., personal debt, personal finance debt, card loans, whatever, credit cards, pay them off before you start investing. But often that may take many, 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 many years. Sometimes I think you should invest your way out of the problem if you can. Just a small amount just to get started. The most important thing is to get started. You can nudge it up later on, but a lot of people sort of put it off for the perfect moment, and that's not really going to happen. As you know, with fitness, with your mindset, with your money, you just got to get on with it and do it, rather than set these weird dates in the future that may or may not ever come.
To me, that hints at like habit formation. So forming the fact that you invest on a monthly basis is a habit, it's a routine that you've stuck to. So even if it is, like you say, a very small amount of money because you've got this other debt that you're having to prioritize, at least you've formulated the habit of, yes, £100 goes into my HL account and it invests in this particular fund on a monthly basis. It's passive. I don't have to think about it. I pay like the whole one of the big conversations I had with Pete was pay yourself first. And it was so vital, because you're just, that £100 is going out regardless of any other expenses that are coming in. Oh, I've got a holiday this month. I've got a new car. It doesn't matter. The £100 that I have committed to invest, and that's just a generic amount that we've named here, always goes into that index fund, and you know that it's occurring. And if you can groove that habit, then of course it's easier to scale it when you become financially more stable. So once that debt's cleared, the £100 becomes £300, becomes £400, becomes £500, and we start to get into a position where it's really starting to move the dial.
Yeah, exactly. It's all about your current self's constantly trying to wriggle out of doing anything good for your future self. And once you sort of understand that concept, that also helps. But yeah, pay yourself first is one of the most important financial behaviors you need to change. Yeah. Good financial advisors are basically behavior modifiers. That's what we do. We modify clients' behavior, get them to do good things and stop them from doing bad things, and that is, priceless when it comes to people and their money. But obviously they think we just, pick funds and, do some, boring financial plumbing. But, at the end of the day, we manage the people, and it's the behavior modification that's the key thing they're paying us for. Everything else is almost thrown in for free with financial advisors. And as I say, the current self is always constantly trying to wriggle out of doing anything good for the future self. And again, once you sort of understand the future self concept in everything, obviously in your health, in your money, you will get there at some point. It's better to sort of assume that you're going to get there rather than assume you're not going to get there. So yeah, changing your behavior now will benefit you in the future.
Yeah, I hadn't really thought of this before, but certainly there's probably a crossover between the younger generation and some of the instant gratification we get from platforms like TikTok that we were discussing already, and maybe not considering that future self in as much, because we're constantly now satisfied almost immediately, whether that's we order Deliveroo right to our front door. We can even order our full grocery shopping. You and I were talking before we hit record about the time I spent in Dubai, and I'm shocked at how everything is pretty much instant from your phone. Like there's no element of like waiting. Like in the past, if you wanted to watch something on television, you would go to Blockbuster and pick the DVD or, God forbid, the VHS back in the day. Whereas now you just touch your smart TV and you've got access to everything and anything. Like I say, Deliveroo is a big example as well. Entertainment through TikTok and through our phones and our screens. And I wonder how much of that is priming people to expect higher returns. And I guess a lot of the crowd that started to invest for the first time during the C19 stuff were maybe investing in stuff that were more immediately gratifying. So some of the meme stocks, some of the crypto coins that were pumping heavily, people were maybe turning their attention to that. And I wonder if we're almost primed as a society nowadays to be like, right, I'm going to chase after that. And yes, my future self will maybe benefit, but my current self is going to cash in here.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, young people need to learn their mistakes. You know, an expert is someone who's made all the mistakes. So again, I don't think there's any shortcuts when it comes to becoming wise with your money. And yeah, as I say, you will do silly things and make mistakes when you're young. You know, we've all been there. We've all thought we could trade Forex. We've all thought we could, you know, buy XYZ stocks. The recent one is obviously crypto, which has sort of died a death, but will come back at some point. But hopefully a lot of people have taken stock through it and sort of taken a personal audit of what they were thinking, what happened, how did it pan out, what are the alternatives, how much money did they lose, rather than just waiting for the next thing to take their fancy and blow up. So yeah, it's been interesting the last few years with that sort of stuff, as you mentioned.
Of course, and you having been in the space for 20 years, you've probably seen lots of these different things come and go in that regard. Maybe the next hot thing, like around we had the kind of dot-com bubble as well. I don't know if you were investing at that point in time, but there's so many different things that have come and gone. Did you ever find yourself susceptible to any of these mistakes?
Yeah, as a personal person coming up in this world, space, life, I've made all the investing mistakes, I'm pretty sure. So we try and avoid anything which is working now. So this is just a rule of thumb, a razor that professional financial advisors, bang on about. We say to our clients, with your family's life savings, we're going to invest in things which have always worked. Anything which is working now, we're going to put in that's working now bucket, and we're going to avoid it. And we do call it financial trash. And in order to invest your family's life savings, like the real serious money, it needs to be invested in real asset classes, productive asset classes. And there's generally only two productive asset classes out there. These are the real asset classes that all of the serious money goes into. And the first one is investing in the stock market, which we call the great companies of the world, that you and me and everyone listening to this uses every single day, every single minute of every single day. These great companies that are all listed on the stock market. The microphone I'm talking to you, the software we're recording on, the seat I'm sitting in, the building I'm in, the electricity I'm using, the toothpaste I used this morning, the coffee I drank, the water I washed my hands. Just every single second of every single day, we are absolutely engulfed in stock market companies. So yeah, a real asset class is, first of all, is the stock market, which we call the great companies and the great businesses of the world that use every single day. The reason why it's a real asset class is because it provides a rising income over time, history being our guide. So these companies sell products to real people, they make profits, and then they distribute these profits out via dividends, or they reinvest back into the company. And over time, for example, if we take Coca-Cola 50 years ago, let's say they had a profit of £1 million 50 years ago, they've got a profit of £1 billion today, just to keep it simple. So the profits have gone up 1,000 times. That's generally how the stock market works. So that's a real asset class. It's a rising income. And the whole reason why the price goes up, the capital rises, is because the income's rising. And that's basically how investing works. If something's got a rising income, it will have a rising capital value as a result of that rising income. So the whole reason why wealth is created via the stock market is because the income's going up that the companies are creating. And then the next real asset class is physical property. Now this one is quite interesting. I'll keep it very simple. Again, rents rise over time, and as a result of the rent rising, the property rises in value. That's generally how that works. Anything else property related when it comes to investing, you should avoid, absolutely avoid. There's lots of sharks in this space. There's lots of blow ups, and it's to be avoided. Physical property, you are the owner. That's the only type of property I think anybody should do. So yeah, they're the two real asset classes. They both provide rising income, which inadvertently provides a rising capital value. History being our guide, that's what's going to happen in the future going forward. Everything else is a distraction and noise. Any other type of financial asset class that someone's pitching to you, it's usually been created by a marketing department and not a financial robot or someone with a lot of financial savvy behind them. Yeah, marketing departments create these things all the time, and they're shiny, they're new, people get excited about them, and they're working now. So there's a short period that they're working, but they've not always worked, and that's basically it. So we say to people, with your serious long-term money, put it in basically global equities, index funds, global equity index funds. Invest and forget, be patient, invest a just about uncomfortable amount every month. That means you're investing the right amount. Invest through all market cycles. And when the stock market declines, it's a temporary sale. All the stock market declines we've ever experienced have been a temporary decline. The advance is permanent. And you're investing in basically human ingenuity. That is what the stock market is. It's a collection of human ingenuity through all the companies that are listed on it. And that's basically it. You'll be distracted along the way. If you want to sort of take punts on random companies, which I do, companies that but if I start buying the product of a company, I'll also invest in the company. But it's not my family's financial fortress, the bulk of my money. It's like a playpen money, an investing playpen, some fun money.
Do you have a rule for a
Yeah,
percentage that you would do that for, Andy?
not really. I'm still quite young and I've got decent income coming in and I've got, quite a bit of money invested. So it's small compared to it. I don't know, 1%, 1.5% if I had to work it out as a number. And as I say, it's just a bit of a release. I normally invest in companies that I start buying the product. If you start buying the product of a company, it means that, it's a real thing as such. So I never really invest in companies that I don't use and are very, aware of. But as I say, the bulk of my money is in global equities,
Have
and
you
it
ever
will always
used
be.
Fiverr before, Andy? Do you know
Yes, I
anything
have
about
used
Fiverr?
Fiverr before a lot. Yeah, I use
Yeah,
Fiverr a lot. I've been using it since it was original. I think it was, yeah. And I've used Upwork. I used Elance. I've used them all over the years. Yeah. Oh, so you're buying the product of Fiverr, then you invested a small amount in the Fiverr stock. I think the Fiverr
I've
stock's down quite heavily, isn't it?
I was going to say, I've seen a lot of people buying into Fiverr that are in the creative space, and they were quite badly stung
Yeah.
by that because it appeared that it was a little bit overinflated during C19, because a lot of the people were making a lot more money during the pandemic were people who were online
Yeah.
businesses, and they were investing
Yeah.
heavily in the back end to create their clips, create their website, their logos, whatever else. So of course, Fiverr was like the place to be to some extent. And I think it differentiated itself from Upwork in terms of some of the features that were going on behind the scenes that made it a bit easier to use. So a lot of people in that space were a little bit biased and they were just pumping cash in. So I don't know what
Yeah.
happened to the valuation, but equally with a lot of these stocks, sometimes it might grow by 20%, but they've had predictions that it's going to grow by 30%. So the stock price almost responds accordingly to that, because its predictions haven't been met in that regard, because it's just such a, like, I don't know, a growth stock, whatever term you want to use. And it's funny to watch how that happens. But I do understand that sometimes when you really like a product in a company, you're like, right, I'm gonna not just invest in funds. I'm gonna pick one or two companies that I really resonate with and I really have
Companies.
firm belief in them.
Yeah. And that I'm buying the product of the company at the moment. I mean, a good one of it is a Warren Buffett example that he didn't do. I mean, he runs an car insurance company called Geico, one of the biggest insurance companies in the US, probably in the world. All they do is car insurance. But at one point in, let's say, 2002, they were paying Google £8 a click, pay-per-click Google or whatever. And again, an alarm bell didn't sort of, I suppose, did go off in his head, but then he didn't pull the trigger on it. He's basically paying them £8 for an invisible product every single day. So Geico was paying, I don't know, £2 million, $2 million a month on PPP Google clicks. He's thinking, I'm buying this product, and this insane how much money this company's making, and he didn't pull the trigger and buy the company. So that again is another example. Obviously, people buying, Microsoft products, Apple products. There's loads of success stories, but it's also quite interesting. It's like parents and stuff are paying loads of money to like Roblox and YouTube or whatever. So they've got a cost. They're buying the product every single month, and it's like, well, your little boy or girl, whatever's paying £50 a month into Roblox, you might as well buy the stock as well at £50, and hopefully over time it's like, well, actually we've got sort of there's a well-known hospitality company that's listed at the moment that me and a lot of people I know sort of are members of and use. So again, it's another example of, and every time I go there, it's fully packed. We're buying like cocktails for 21 quid, and it's like, wow. And this is a listed company. Like, how can this company not make money? Obviously, it might not, and I'm going to get it wrong, but it's a little bit of fun. So the bulk of your money's in, global equities index funds, and it's the only genuine passive investment out there. People talk about property being passive. It's totally not passive. I mean, you have periods where it's a little bit quiet. In terms of the tenants are getting on with it, and there's not too much, action happening, and the boiler's working, and the window's not popped or something. But it is certainly not, hands off. But obviously, property has leverage; it's got other benefits, but there's a horrible tax situation around it. So anyway, they're the two options for you to grow your wealth. But the most important thing is investing in yourself, and then the second most important thing is probably setting up a business of your own. That's where you're going to create real wealth. I mean, yes, you can become wealthy being a high earning employee over time, shifting a few quid into pensions, ISAs, and, retiring somewhat early. But in terms of creating real wealth, it always has to be businesses. That's where, all of the, real wealth has been created in the world. Yeah.
One of the other things you said earlier, Andy, was around investing enough that feels just almost a tiny bit uncomfortable each month. How can people assess that tolerance?
It's not that hard, as long as you've got someone with you. So, for example, I'd say to you, right, you should start investing in ISAs. And you go, okay, Andy, how much should I invest? If I say £2,000, you're going to go, well, hold on, that's a bit much, maybe. I'll say, okay, how much you want to invest then? And you might say, I don't know, 400 quid, whatever. You can just sort of get to that number. But again, people are always trying to sort of wriggle out of it. And it's interesting when we do it with clients, they've often got a, I was thinking number. They might say, like, for example, oh, I think you should, start a pension. And they'll say, okay, how much do you think I should invest? And we would say, like, we've done a calculation very quickly, back of a sort of napkin. We think you should invest £1,300 a month. And they'd say, oh, God, where'd you get that from? I was thinking more like 400 quid. They've often got an I was thinking number in their head, weirdly, when they sort of ask these financial questions. But yeah, it should feel just a little bit uncomfortable. Because otherwise you're not putting enough effort into it. The heavy lifting in creating wealth is not the investment returns. That will come. The heavy lifting is your contribution schedule. Whereas a lot of people say, oh, I did pensions. I did £100 a month for the last 35 years, and it's only, I don't know, 100 grand now. It's like, what, you didn't increase your contributions along the way. You're the one that's caused the problem here, not the investments is not done as well as you thought. So the heavy lifting needs to be your contribution schedule, and not the investment returns. The investment returns will come, generally it's 10% a year compounded over, multi-decades with loads of ups and downs. It's not a sort of linear journey.
Completely agree. The audience kind of got a bit of a red pill moment when I had Nick Maggiulli on the podcast. He's the author of Just Keep Buying, and he very much kind of rubbished people who were like trying to stock pick and be like, oh, but this stock might get me a 21% return. And he was like, you're investing like £500 a month. That's like £6,000 a year. Why do you care about getting 21% rather than 10%? Like, concentrate on earning more money, putting more money into the market. Yeah, keep moving the dial. And it was quite a challenging moment, because I think a lot of people, particularly during like 21, 22 or early 22 anyway, until we had the kind of Ukraine Russia stuff, were very much like, right, I'm going to try and pick this particular stock. And you're thinking, the market, and if you're in your 20s and your early 30s, you're going to be in the market for such a long time. It's so much more important that you can increase that £500 a month to 600 to 700 to 800, and then really start to increase the amount that's going into the market. And I think it's quite a hard thing for people to hear, because it's much more glamorous online to maybe shout about, oh, you could pick this stock that returns 12x, 13x, and you're like, okay, yeah, it's great. It's much more exciting. Whereas if you're like, do you know what? Like, maybe you should start your own company and build a bit more, or maybe you should move company with your current employer and get another 10 grand a year salary and invest an extra few £100 a month, and then you can maybe worry a bit more about where it's going.
Yeah, exactly. Focus on the contribution schedule, certainly in the early days, rather than the returns. The returns will come. Yeah, good point.
You've quoted a bit of examples from Warren Buffett there, but I know one of the phrases you talked about is from his business partner, Charlie Munger, and he famously said that
Yes.
the first 100K is a bitch. And that refers to both generating and making that 100K, but also making sure you've got like 100K staked or invested within the market as well. Why is that first 100K so hard?
Yeah, this is a brilliant quote from Charlie Munger, who's Buffett's very wise older business partner. I think he's going to be 100 this year, which is amazing. Hopefully, he lives to 150. Who knows? Yeah, he said the first 100K is a bitch. So, what does he mean by that? He means from the journey from 0 to 100K is going to be the most challenging. It's going to be a combination of thrift in terms of you cutting down your expenses and hopefully increasing your income and having some excess money to invest. It's going to be a time, so you're going to have to be committed to it. It's not going to happen overnight, so it's going to be years likely, unless you're a super high earner out the blocks and a super high saver, which is very rare. And then it's a behavior change. So during that, you need to set up investment contributions and coming out every month. You need to loosely learn how investing works. So again, that's going to be a bit of a journey. But also, you've been through the milestones, and this is the key thing. When you start from 0 and invest £100 a month, when you get to your first 1,000, you're like, wow, this is fantastic. This thing actually works. When you get to 5,000, you're like, oh my God, it's like quite a bit of money at the moment. And hopefully you then don't buy a car or something silly and start again. But that often happens. But that's okay. But then you get to 10,000, you get to 25,000, you get to 50,000. You go, oh my God, £50,000 here from just doing this weird thing every month that's like I haven't even felt coming out my bank account. Okay, I'll increase the contributions now. Oh, well, I've got a bit of investment return now. I've got 50,000 and the market went up 20% last year. That's great. I've just created this free money out of nowhere. So you go through all of these different points that make you think, wow, this actually does work. And also at that time, you think, why am I spending money on X, Y, Z things that I don't need, shiny, useless things? So then you start controlling your behavior. You start fighting against lifestyle creep. And then you think, oh my God, actually 100K is on the horizon here. And then you might get a pay rise. And then you think, okay, well, I'm going to invest all the difference in my investment portfolio. So the journey from 0 to 100, you experience the most amount of behavior change, you experienced the most amount of learnings or key learning points. You become a bit smarter, a bit wiser, a bit calmer, a bit older. These are all just great things. And then you hit 100K and you think, wow, this is absolutely fantastic. It works. I've seen it happen. And then so from going from 100K to 500K, obviously the numbers are a lot bigger, but the journey is going to be a walk in the park. You've done all of the heavy lifting, all of the learnings, all of the unlearnings, all of the mistakes, all of the teachings from 0 to 100K. So from 100K to 500K, it's like 10% as painful sort of psychological journey compared to the 0 to 100K. So yeah, and I think Charlie goes a bit more and he says, you should be eating beans, getting on the bus until you get to 100K. We don't want to hear anything about spending money. Whereas obviously people who have a bit of a balance between enjoying now and sort of planning for then. That is the trade-off in life, isn't it? You've got to, enjoy now, but you're planning for then, and how much, of the balance between those two, do you have?
That whole future self concept that you were talking about earlier. And I do think there's a lot of merit to that because, as you said, once you've got the 100K, the compounding effect is going to be so much more powerful to get you to 500 than you going from 0 to 100 because there's almost very limited. Like 10% of £100 is £10. It's nothing, but 10% of 100K is a significant chunk for you to start to move forward, and it feels a bit more exciting as well. Like you say, sometimes we do need both the carrot and the stick, and sometimes the carrot can be that, oh, I've actually just seen that this money has grown. It's free money, so to speak, and it's much more encouraging to make sure your behaviors are almost reinforced off the back of it as well. Like we can talk from a fitness example. The first time you see maybe like you lift a heavier weight at the gym and you're like, oh, well, I've been showing up for 3 weeks now and that's great. Next, I'm going to have a rippling six pack. Yeah, maybe it'll take some time, but we'll get there. And you start to see those results.
Yeah. I think from 0 to 100K, very, very ballpark, probably your contributions will be probably 90,000 of that. The returns might be 10. You might have a different period where you've got better stock market returns just on that journey from it. But if you realize, okay, to get to 100K, 90% or 80% of it, 90% of it is going to have to be directly my contributions. The cherry on the top is this wonderful thing, stock market returns, which is magic. So it's turned your 80 into 100. If you spend that 20, it's like magic money. It's been created out of nowhere. a personal story with me. We went through IVF to get my children. It cost quite a bit of money to do the IVF, but it happened to be at a point when the stock market was doing very well. So I spent the IVF out of stock market returns as such. So yes, my children cost me X thousands of pounds, but in reality, it's the wonder of the stock market. So they technically didn't cost me anything, if that makes sense. And once people understand that concept, when they've got a bit of amount of capital, when you do get these returns and you do spend that money, it is like spending free money. Obviously, you want to keep it invested in compound the compound. But if you do need to spend things and upgrade your house, get married, do various things, hopefully you're doing it with stock market returns, because the stock market goes up 75% of the time and down 25% of the time. When it goes down 25% of the time, that's when you want to ideally increase your investment contribution, because you're buying stock market units, and when the units are cheap, you want to buy more, but obviously people don't do that. And so it's great odds. The stock market goes up 75% of the time and down 25% of the time. This is madness. So people do need to get their head around it and become investing literates, but it is a journey. But once you get it and you cracked it, it's fantastic. You can then focus on all the other stuff.
I know that the 100K target actually varies depending on what people have earned. Andy, and I've heard you speak about this before, because I think people who are on a higher salary should be aiming for a much bigger figure than 100K. Equally, people who are on a potentially lower salary, 100K
Sure.
might be a little bit out of reach for a period of time, but they're still working towards a particular figure. How does that differ? And do you find that maybe a difficult pill for some people to swallow? Because if you're talking about the importance of 100K and somebody who's maybe on an extremely high income is like, yeah, I can do that, no problem at all. Not no problem at all, but I can do that quite quickly.
I don't think the numbers are the important thing. It's the journey that you go on, and the self-discovery and the learnings and the mistakes and the things you've got to pick up along it. But yeah, you're right. If someone's just finished, just graduated and they're on 100 grand a year, so they're clearing, 5.5 grand a month. Still, to get to 100K from zero is going to take a lot of effort, because they're earning a lot, they'll be spending a lot. I think it's just the concept, really. But yes, if you're on £20,000 a year and you've managed to accumulate even £25,000, that's very enviable in terms of what you've got coming in and what you're shifting away. Yeah, your saving percentages are quite an important thing. During C19, as you say, I think as a nation, we were saving something like 25 or 40% of the money coming in, because we had nowhere to spend it. But I think on average, developed countries invest about sort of 3 to 5% of the money coming in. Some other countries that are a bit more developed but have more of a saving culture, I think like Japan and China and stuff, I think they invest maybe about 10 to 15% of their money. But you need to understand what that saving percentage is. So the saving percentage is important. I think a lot of people will say, minimum 10% of the net income that's coming in, ideally 20, ideally 30. And the people that are being very much into the sort of financial independence, retire early movement, they're all, saving sometimes 50, 60% of their net income. But it's good to have a high saving percentage, but also it's great to have a good amount of income coming in. So a lot of roads in creating wealth lead to try and increase your income, be it as an employee or a business owner. But there's no point increasing your income if you're then not saving that difference. So getting a pay rise means nothing if you're not going to invest the difference as such. If you get a pay rise and it's an extra £500 a month, then ideally you should immediately start investing that. Yeah.
Lifestyle creep happens though, doesn't it? And people immediately think I'm going to spend all of that money that's coming.
Lifestyle creep happens a lot. Yeah, we talk about it as financial advisors. So a lot of our clients, let's say they've just got a pay rise, and they say, "Oh, great news, Andy! I've got a pay rise. I've got an extra £1,000 a month coming in." The question us financial advisors say is, out of that £1,000, how much do you think they're going to invest with us? Let's say they got an ISA and they're already doing £1,000 a month. They ring you up and say, "Great news! I've got a pay rise. I've got £1,000 a month extra coming in." And the financial advisor goes, "Oh, great. Okay, how much of that do you want to, increase your contributions by?" The question is, how much do you think that client is going to contribute? Most clients will typically probably say, "Okay, I'll increase it by 200 quid or three." Again, that's another example of they're not being harsh enough on the current self to benefit the future self. In an ideal world, they say, "I got this pay rise, an extra £1,000 a month." Obviously, it's going to go straight, to increasing the contribution. So increase it by £1,000, Andy. But it doesn't work like that. They'll try and wriggle out of it. If you get half of it, I think that's quite a good thing. But yeah, it's an interesting sort of thought experiment to play, but it happens with real clients.
There's always a temptation to just completely upkeep your lifestyle and level up your lifestyle when you get more money in. But like you say, there's that balance to strike between the current self and the future self. And one of the hardest things to strike between that balance is if maybe you sometimes err on that really frugal side. Like you mentioned the fire movement there. I've hosted a gentleman, Steve Adcock, who retired at 35, but the way that he was living between, I don't know, maybe 21 and 35 was in a way that you'd be like, okay, I'm not really sure I'm willing to do that. Exactly that. Very, very frugal indeed. And also, the caveat with a lot of these guys that you see online that retire super, super early, they had big incomes. Him and his wife were both earning about 120 grand a year. So combined household income of just under £250,000 or $250,000. That is an awful lot of money. And most people are not in that situation. So there's always caveats there. However, I know that you've got a bucket list and I want to understand, how does that help you to both live well while still managing your finances and looking towards the future?
Yeah, I suppose I've had a bucket list. This is again a good thought experiment to play with people. So, what is it you still wish to achieve? If you achieved everything, if you're looking back, is there anything you want to do? I think the important things with me, the main ones really to have kids. So I've sort of ticked that. Had kids. I've got 2 kids, twins, Poppy and Milo, sort of 2 years and 8 months now. So that's all good. I had other ones just about places to go, things to do. I wanted to go to Africa, so I spent quite a bit of time in Africa. I wanted to go to South Korea, Japan, did that. I wanted to go on the Beatles tour. I wanted to go to the El Clasico football. I try and do one thing a year. Things that are still to be done. Burning Man. I don't know if that excites
I've heard
you,
of that
but
festival, yeah.
I think it happens in September. I know quite a few people that go there, but I never get around to sorting it out. I want to go to TED, which is the sort of global conference. I think they have, but I think you only need to be invited. But again, that's I've been to some TEDx's, and I want to go to Macau, which is sort of an island just off China, which is the sort of Las Vegas of Asia. I'm quite into human misbehavior in all of its glory. So spending time in casinos is always exciting for me, seeing what madness people get up to. So yeah, just a couple of things really. But I've done the bulk of the things I want to do, if you know what I mean. But obviously, yeah, there's still people, places to go, things to do. Yeah, how do you manage your bucket
knowing those
list?
things, knowing those things, Andy, I guess, how does that help you to financially behave, but also make sure that you're living along the way? I suppose you said maybe like doing one of them a year, you're kind of almost budgeting for that, knowing that this is coming up, it's going to cost X, so that might affect my investments by Y, and knowing that the delta between those can be made up by, I don't know, taking like growing the business by a particular amount or whatever it is that makes you happy in your head, that you can go and pursue those things while still knowing that you're looking after retirement, Andy?
I mean, a lot of the things I've mentioned are not, a huge amounts of money. So it's not as if I need to, overly plan leading up to them. Yeah, I'm still in growing business phase. I suppose I think I'm slightly now turning towards slightly focusing on a bit more on expenses. But yeah, I'm the classic, obviously trying to enjoy now and plan for then. But I've got enough time, health permitting. I'm always going to be in businesses that hopefully, generate some good income. I've got quite a sort of lean, sort of outsourced team, so I don't have that much heavy expenses on staff, which is normally the biggest cost. I've got sort of an outsourced team of 12, but I've only got one full-time employee that's sort of on the books. Yeah, so I'm constantly trying to, just continue to build them out, and at the same time, plan for the future. How do you manage your bucket list? What's your strategy on it? You,
Interestingly, it's
I know
quite
you.
it's
I know
quite a
you've
new.
got some strong goals.
Yeah, I've got some strong goals in particular, but I don't necessarily have a bucket list written down. And it was a concept that when I was listening to the podcast, I wanted to write it down to understand how somebody who's maybe wired in a slightly similar way to me in terms of how aspirational you are and how focused you are, albeit um, you're further down the tracks in terms of building your own business and building your own platform. And I was just interested in the concept and like what you maybe had on there as well, because I think initially when I think of the term bucket list, I didn't think you would maybe have like kids on there. I tend to think it's more about experiences. So like when you named El
Right.
Clasico, go to this island, I was thinking, right, okay, that all makes sense. But then like something is purposeful and is important. And to me as well, is it like completely open book? Like I want to have a family, I want to have kids, I want to be a good father. That's important for me. But I didn't necessarily think that I would have that on a bucket list of like experiences. But I think that's where everyone's concept of what a list of to-dos might
Yeah.
look like differs massively, doesn't it? And you probably have that with your
Yeah.
clients as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're right. It's normally experiences and places depending on where they are in the journey. But then if they're younger, then getting married and having kids is can certainly be on it, because obviously it's a very important thing. But as you say, that's sort of maybe something that will naturally happen anyway. It's not something you have to maybe overly plan. I don't know, but yeah, good luck with it.
Of course, of course. I'd love to understand, as somebody that's been in the profession for such a long time, what's the most important financial decision that you've made on a personal basis?
By country mile, I'm going self-employed. I went self-employed at 24. I'm sort of unemployable for life, which is great. It's not been plain sailing. It's been ups and downs, but it's certainly been the big domino that's led to sort of everything else. So yeah, I was very pleased that I did that very early on. And I think a lot of people that become self-employed and have been self-employed for a while, I think they say after 10 years of being self-employed, apart from your sort of old mates, everyone in your life is another business owner, because it's quite hard to sort of connect on a level with employees because you just have a completely different mindset. It's changed a bit actually since COVID, because a lot of employees now are living the lives of self-employed entrepreneurs, because they're only going to the office once or twice a week. They can go to the gym at 11 o'clock in the morning. They can finish work slightly early. They can work later into the night. They're still getting their work done. But we don't have any sort of set hours, working for yourself. I could get up really early one day and work, solidly for 6 hours, or I could, not come into the office till 11 o'clock. It's a little bit more unstructured. But now employees are living unstructured lives, which I'm somewhat a little bit pissed off about, because it used to be like the whole reason why you go self-employed is because you don't want to go into the office 5 days a week. And now they're like, oh, you don't have to come to the office 5 days a week. I think it's going to stifle entrepreneurism, actually, because people are going to be like, well, why am I going to give up this cushy 100 grand a year going into the office once a week, 29 days holiday, 10% pension gig, when I'm going to, be sitting with you down a local cafe, trying to drum up business? It's like, it's just night and day, my friend. I'm not going to do it. But yeah, that's probably an extreme example.
That's funny. No, I think there's elements that would stifle some people from being entrepreneurial, but genuine people who want to have real control over their life and their destiny and how they spend their
Oh,
time, I
yes,
think
yes.
are going to be much more driven. But yeah,
But
maybe people who might have dabbled.
if they're a little bit on the fence, like, should I do this or get a bit more autonomy? But then, as I say, the biggest issue for a lot of people is the commuting and the being present and presenteeism in the office, or certainly a big factor towards it. Whereas now that's sort of changed. It's quite interesting that, yeah, like some companies, organizations, even government departments have spent 3 years nobody in the office, and now they want everyone to come back full time. And all the employees are saying, look, it's worked. It would have been 3 years we've been doing this. It's not falling apart. And now you want us to come back 5 days a week. I know there are different options where people are saying 1 day, 2 day, 3 days. But yeah, certainly the biggest financial and everything life decision I made was becoming self-employed. But as I say, it's not easy. It's been challenges along the way. Some people can do it, some people can't. Yeah, I'm like 17 years into it now. So I've been through the worst stages. Hopefully now it's just all the good stuff.
What lesson do you think you took the longest to learn when it came to your own business journey?
God, I don't really know. I think it's about building, a great team. So having sort of experts around you that do certain things. So just, I suppose, getting better at team building. But I've got quite lucky at that. I found sort of, other freelancers and entrepreneurs quite early on, and I've stuck with a lot of people for years. So yeah, I'm a massive fan of like the freelancer or the outsourced option. Because again, you just find an expert at one thing that they do very well, and obviously you can tap into that and use a sort of team. But I'm constantly learning. There's never a point when you know it all. So it's a constant personal development journey in everything I'm doing, really.
Yeah, I certainly think so. And I think the kind of people that listen to a podcast like this one on a weekly basis, it's very much based on personal development and pursuing your best self. It kind of never feels like it's ever going to be done. You're always going to maybe, like, I'll bring on a guest next week and they'll be like, oh, I'd never even thought of that. I'll never even thought of that particular area of my life that I could optimize or push for a little bit more and move the dial a little bit on. So I think that's always important. But I'm interested in, like,
Yeah, go on. I think everybody thinks they're just getting started. You know, as I said before, you know, you say to Jeff Bezos, like, "Well done, my friend. You've just become the richest guy in the world. You've got the most successful company on planet Earth." And he'd look at you and you go, "You're done now. You can just chill." He'd look at you and go, "You know, what are you talking about? I'm just getting started, my friend." So I think a lot of people, you know, that they're always on that mindset of, you know, we're just getting started now. There's always more to do. There's always other goals to achieve. There's always, you know, pushing forward. You know, even myself, it's like if I if I thought where I'd be now with the sort of reach I have and the income levels I had, would I be happy and, you know, content? It's like, well, not really. Everything's just moved on a bit, isn't it? So we've got sort of new sort of targets to achieve. So yeah, always striving. And the good thing specifically about financial advisors, we are paid inadvertently by our clients to become smarter, wiser over time. You know, so I say to my clients, I read all the books so you don't have to. You know, if something happens in their life, and I'm not actually, this is how you're going to sort of fix this solution. They're like, oh, great, you know, well done for reading that book 9 years ago. That's now come to fruition and been, you know, slightly useful for me. So if you do want to become a financial advisor, it is a profession that you are inadvertently paid to become better over time. You know, personal development is sort of built into it, and all financial advisors, the good ones, are very sort of active and pro in that. We're always learning more and more stuff from each other, pushing forward. I don't know if it's the
And you
same
have
in
to
other
keep up with the
professions, but I'm
latest
assuming it
trends as
is.
well. You would have to keep up with the
Yeah, we
latest trends
do
as
to
well.
some degree. Yeah, we do to some degree, like continued personal development, CPD or whatever it's called. Yeah, we have to know what's happening. Yeah, we certainly need to know what's happening, you know, in the world because our clients are reading that sort of stuff. Our job is to obviously say a lot of it's unimportant, but still we need to be aware of what's happening to then say, you know, well, I think the classic line is everything, you know, a client brings up, it's like, why will that matter in 30 years' time? You know, what about this? What about that? It's like, well, why would that be affecting you in 30 years' time? Then, oh shit, actually, it won't actually. So I don't know what I was thinking. We used to say as well when
That's a
people,
razor to use, isn't it? A razor in terms of like cutting through, as you've spoken about in your own show. And
yes.
I spoke to a gentleman called Sahil Bloom who writes these threads on Twitter about different razors as well. And he's an absolute genius. And so many times,
Oh
if
yeah,
you
he was
just
the
have
guy
like
that I used his list. I used his list
yes,
on the show. I was referring to it. Yeah.
yeah, I've had
Yeah.
Sahil on the show. He was an incredible guest, and his Twitter's brilliant. And I really believe that if you can use some of these little frameworks and razors and ways of sifting through
Heuristics,
and
rules of
deciding things,
thumb. Yeah.
exactly that. So, and one of those questions is great. Will this matter in 30 years' time? Like, oh, Bank of England increases interest rates to 4%. Yes,
Yeah.
at the moment it might spook you, but what does it
Yeah.
actually mean for you when you're 50 years old,
Yeah.
60-year-old, 70-year-old? Potentially nothing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
A, a,
key points like that. Just go on.
a lot of what underpins what you were saying there is that whole progress is happiness piece. So while you were saying like, if you looked at yourself, like say, let's say 6 years ago when you were building the platform and when you were building your business, if you looked at where you are now, you would I be content? Would I be happy? You would probably be pleased and proud, but you wouldn't necessarily be
Yeah,
completely content. I think contentment's quite a strange feeling to always seek. Like you should be like proud and satisfied with where you are, but not completely satiated in terms of like done. And like Tony Robbins has a quote, and my friend David Hatt, who's a regular podcast guest for me, he tries to pinch it for himself, and it's progress is happiness. And it really is like
yeah,
feeling like you're working towards something purposeful. Like you're saying there, like sometimes like a weekly show feels like, oh god, like I'm not sure I'm going to get this out, but like you've relentlessly turned up for 280 odd episodes. Like
yeah,
that feels good to look back and do that, and like, especially the week where you were like, no idea what we're going to talk about this week, but I'm going to release an episode anyway, and it's going to be one that I feel like I spoke well on, I presented well on, I put forward, and those will be the ones sometimes you get a message from a listener being like, "Oh, Andy, that was so helpful for me." And like
yeah,
I listened to the chat GPT one, and I was really wondering where you were going to go with it, but it's just also just an interesting topic, and because I've got a habit, and we're talking about habits earlier, that I listen to your show when it goes up and it pops into my subscription box, I'm gonna listen unless it's something that I'm like, that's not relevant to me in any way. So if you were like what to do as a 60-year-old before retirement, I wouldn't listen to that because I'm like, it's such
yeah.
a long time away from me. It's not really relevant unless you were gonna share what to do for 30 years prior to that. I'd be like, okay, I'm interested in that. So I do think when you're like progressing and moving towards something, it does feel good, and like you're doing that relentlessly, and that's why I think happiness is like a forever moving dial that we're trying to reach and touch up to.
And also the thing that's sort of come to the fore recently is the human condition needs to have stress, like anything to be moving forward and doing stuff and being active, it needs to have some stress on it. So if you've got zero stress in your life, you won't sort of push yourself forward. So again, it's this perpetual situation where you will always, in an ideal world, you'll always feel stressed because it's always going to push you forward. But at the time, it doesn't feel right. It's like, when am I going to have complete calmness in my life? It's like, if you did have that, it's sort of not a good state to be in. So yeah, I sort of, I think I'm concurring what you said.
Yeah, I certainly think so. And it seems from the outside looking in that the last 10 years have been a real success for you, Andy. You've built something really special. Congratulations on your twins as well. But I wonder, what does the next 10 years need to look like for you to consider those a success as well?
I don't really know. I mean, I'm in this sort of important decade, I suppose, of my 40s. It's going to be much of the same. I am being more business focused. I've got sort of 3 different companies that I run, so I'm sort of business overload at the moment. I don't need any more things to throw into the mix. So it's going to be continuing to be a financial advisor and serving my clients, continuing to put out as much content as I can for end consumers, and continue to build my sort of financial advisor focused brand. My big brand that I'm building is called Humans Under Management. It's a behavioral finance brand that does sort of marketing for financial advisors and conferences. So I'm going to continue to build that out. I think that's the sort of brand that's got the most potential. So yeah, that's going to be a key focus. And yeah, continuing to work on everything we've spoken about, the 3 healths: mental health, physical health, and financial health. Yeah, so it's going to be quite an interesting a decade for myself. But again, I'm not going to put too much pressure on it. Obviously, I'm just going to continue to do what I've done. Really, I think in your 20s you're just finding out how the world works, making some mistakes, and pushing forward. Your 30s you're somewhat crystallizing what you like, what you don't like, who you don't like. I think in your 40s you should be, at your peak. Again, it's just random chunks of 10 years that we've discussed there, and it's going to be different for everybody. But yeah, I feel like I'm going to be hopefully in my peak during my 40s. But at the same time, you've got sort of you're less motivated to do things. You don't have so many goals, but I suppose you have bigger goals. You have bigger North Stars. But I don't really need to do any more exams. I don't really need to learn any more books. I will, but there's nothing sort of burning. I suppose it's unlearning, refining, and just continue to move forward. Really, I'm sure you've
Continue
got
to
a
move
lot more
forward.
going on in your next 10 years than me.
We'll see, Andy. But no, I'm excited to watch it all unfold. Really grateful to have connected with you. I'm sure the audience have loved this one. If they want to continue the conversation with you, where should they head towards?
I suppose the best place is either Twitter or LinkedIn. On LinkedIn, I'm Andy Hart, London, I think, or Maven Adviser, Maven Money. On Twitter, I'm Maven Adviser. And check out my podcast, which is called Maven Money. It's on all the podcast platforms. I think I put a megasode out, which sounds a bit wanky, but it's sort of the best of. I think it's 7 hours long. I think it's a good place to maybe start if you want to be sort of exposed to some of the ideas and stuff that I've shared. But thank you for inviting me on, mate. It's been great, and I'm also excited to see where you're going to go, which is
Yeah,
going to be
absolute pleasure.
exciting.
Yeah, the Twitter and the LinkedIn will be linked in the show notes, guys. Thank you very much for joining me, and I'll be back to speak to you all again very, very soon.